Welcome back to a special edition of the Business of Government Hour. Leaders Speak, a conversation on changing the way government does business. The U.S. Department of Defense is one of the largest and most complex organizations in the world, managing a budget more than twice that of the world's largest corporation and overseeing millions of personnel operating worldwide. Given the size and complexity of the department's finances and operations, along with a rapid pace of change, engagement in major military campaigns, and worldwide economic uncertainty, it is imperative that DoD create an agile, responsive, and efficient operation. In this segment, we present the perspectives of two key DoD leaders directly involved in changing the way the U.S. Department of Defense does its business, both bringing an exacting combination of practical knowledge and an understanding of the work to be done and the progress already achieved. First up, Bob Hale, Undersecretary of Defense and Comptroller, on the complexity of managing the U.S. Department of Defense.
I'll go with the facts first. This year, we will execute about $688 billion worth of budget authority of the taxpayers' money to maintain our national security. So we obligate $2 to $3 billion a day on average. It's a very sizable amount. In terms of the specific things that I do, as I mentioned, we spend a lot of time formulating budgets. It's our way of putting together our priorities. Also need to put them together in a way that can convince the Congress and the public that we both need the resources and will spend them appropriately to maintain national security. And then we have a responsibility to make sure that we execute those budgets in a manner that's legal, and there are 8,000 pages in the DoD financial management regulations, so there are lots of laws and regulations, that's effective, that we meet the needs of our warfighters, and finally it's efficient for the sake of the taxpayers, and maybe particularly in these days, efficiency is very much on our minds.
As achieving efficiencies is very much on the mind of Undersecretary Hale, so are many of the challenges he faces managing the resources of the U.S. Department of Defense.
Well, certainly a key challenge is to make sure that we acquire the resources that we need to meet national security objectives, and do that when we're dealing with a nation that is in an economic crisis. I think a key challenge is striking that right balance, getting the resources we need, but understanding that we need to make every dollar count in order to hold down the deficit. Once we get the resources, we need to execute them, as I've said, in a manner that's effective. I think we do that pretty well. A bigger challenge, though, is how well we do at documenting how we've spent the money and presenting that information to the public. And in particular, we are one of the two federal agencies that has never had a clean opinion, accounting opinion or audit opinion on its financial statements. And that's something we need to change. The last one I'll mention is working for a strong financial management workforce. We need to have those 68,000 people well-trained, and I think they generally are. So I'd say that the budget job, certainly a major challenge, auditability, a major challenge, working to maintain a strong workforce, also a challenge.
Auditability is a major challenge for DoD. Undersecretary Hale outlines DoD's financial improvement and audit readiness strategy in changing the way it does business.
Let me start by saying I believe the Department of Defense has reasonable controls over its budgets. There are some of our critics who assert the contrary. I think they're wrong. As evidence of that, I'd just note quickly that we have 3,000 auditors who are watching our program and financial moves, and yet we have quite high levels of compliance with key financial legislation, quite high levels of proper payments. But we do need to achieve auditable financial statements for a variety of reasons. They'll help us clean up some imperfections that we may talk about more in our business processes, but most importantly, they'll reassure the public that we're reasonable stewards of their money. And in terms, when I came into this job, there had been progress made, no question. But I think I quickly realized the department wasn't heading in a single direction. Services were doing different things. Some were doing more, some less, no common purpose. We were sometimes trying to do things where there wasn't much management commitment to doing it. So we formulated what I call it a focused approach. It basically is pretty simple. It says let's put our highest priorities on improving information and achieving audit readiness for the kinds of information we most use to manage the Pentagon. And that's first and foremost budgetary information, because we manage the department based on budgets. And second, where our assets are and how many we have, which is very important to warfighters. Auditors call it existence and completeness. So we have focused our attention on trying to improve information for those categories and move toward audit readiness.
Given DoD's scale of operation, Bob Hale highlights some of the major challenges and obstacles facing the department in its efforts to improve financial information and audit readiness.
You stated one of them in the question, which is our size and our geographical dispersion. What they mean is that we can't go hire an army of accountants, or it would be such a large army that we could never afford it, and do all this work manually. And that brings me to two other major challenges or impediments, if you will, that we face. First, our systems, our financial systems, many of them are old. Some of them date back to the 70s and 80s, and they aren't designed to do what auditors expect. They're designed to keep track of budgets. They're not designed to accommodate audits. When an auditor pulls a sample of thousands of payments spread all around the world, we have to go chase down the paper, and it's a task that you can't do quickly, and it's very expensive. The new systems that we're putting in will keep this information in an automated fashion, so it works well. We'll push a button, and when an auditor asks for it, it will be there. So we need new financial systems. The other thing we need are to improve our business processes. Well, I think we have reasonable controls. Our business processes are variable across our commands, sometimes from base to base. They may be effective, but in some cases they're simply not something an auditor would accept. The auditors want to see more detail where we put it, and so we're going to have to change that business practice in order to move toward auditability. So there are some major challenges that we've got to overcome. We're on our way, but it's going to be a lengthy journey.
Although the road to achieve auditability at DoD is lengthy and arduous, Undersecretary Hale points to some of the key successors to date.
Well, we have made some progress. The Army Corps of Engineers, which is actually not part of the DoD budget, but still affiliated with the military, has fully auditable financial statements and is maintaining them, has for several years. Several of our large defense agencies have had auditable statements for sometimes more than a decade and have maintained them. The Defense Finance and Accounting Service, Defense Contract Audit Agency, Defense Commissary Agency, and some others. And some of our trust funds, we maintain some very large trust funds for military retirement and military health care, also have positive audit opinions. What we haven't done yet is achieve that goal for any of the military services, and that is by far the highest hurdle to leap. They are much more complex. They're bigger than anything we have gone after yet. But we have, for the first time ever, a statement of a military service, in this case the United States Marine Corps, under audit their statement of budgetary resources, and I'm cautiously optimistic that we'll see a positive opinion this year, more optimistic that we'll make it by next year. So we're moving into what I might call the big boy issues of auditability in terms of actually working on the military services, and we just have to go after them before we're ever going to get